We had one guy on that jury who said he got his news, we thought he said from a temple. It turns out he gets his news from a podcaster by the name of Tim Pool, who's an incredibly right-wing, conspiratorial, conservative incel guy who had said really negative things about E. Jean Carroll.
Flashback.
You don't feel like a victim.
I was not thrown on the ground and ravished. You know,
But I think most people think as it is a violent assault. It is not.
I think most people think of as being.
Let's take a short break.
Think of the fantasies.
We're going to take a quick break. If you can stick around, we'll talk more on the other side.
You're fascinating to talk to.
What's going on, everyone? Jeremy here from The Quartering. Interesting news clip surfacing today, shared by Tenet Media, where the prosecutor, Donald Trump prosecutor, has a complete unhinged meltdown over Tim Pool. I don't understand how the Beanie Man lives in these people's heads rent-free. I mean, yes, he has a very popular show. His Timcast IRL show, when there's big news, can reach 100,000 live concurrent viewers. And I think that is the biggest reason they fear him, because he has reach, and it's rapidly extending beyond what even CNN or MSNBC or Fox News could even hope for. Their audiences are all, going in the ground, while Tim's audience and other content creators, other streamers out there are creating live shows, and people are turning up for them and in big numbers instead of watching mainstream media. The entire product that, for example, somebody like Tim Pool offers, or myself, is essentially de-spitting or trimming the fat off whatever kind of mainstream media publication nonsense is out there, essentially to de-propagandize various pieces of information. But this video yesterday came out from E. Jean Carroll, the prosecutor of Donald Trump, having a little weirdo melty about Tim Pool. And, what's interesting is we can go back to when the actual article came out. It was earlier last year when the whole Tim Pool stuff came out. But in this latest interview, let's listen to the interview because it's hilarious.
For his actions. You said his behavior during the trial was, quote, so atrocious in various ways, he almost gave the jury no choice, as if he was taunting them to do it. Can you tell us more and talk about the power of evidentiary proceedings in a disinformation-laden world?
Right. So that really, I think, is the...
By the way, when the mainstream media or any member of this is the prosecutor here, they use disinformation, misinformation, they are almost exclusively, in my experience, referring to information that they don't like or information that they find inconvenient.
The major problem here. It's about our media and our communications ecology and how it differs. So let me kind of give you a very brief overview of the two trials. So the first trial against E. Jean Carroll, on behalf of E. Jean Carroll.
Yes, there you go.
We had both cases, we had a jury of 9. The first jury, there was no one from New York City.
By the way, could you imagine not understanding that maybe people are worried about whether or not the man will get a fair trial? I personally don't think, at least in my opinion, that Donald Trump got a fair trial in New York. Maybe he really did cook the books to save some tax money. Fine, give him his fine. It's the law is the law. Now, most people will say, hey, obviously everyone does it. And that may be true. And I think in this case, it's my opinion that the law was unevenly applied just to Donald Trump for the express purpose of draining campaign funds from him. So I'm not shocked that they had to go far and wide to find a juror that perhaps they think would be impartial. By the way, he lost this trial, even with Timcast superfan on it.
In the jury. Takes place in Lower Manhattan. No one from the Bronx, no one from either Manhattan or the Bronx. Very few people, I think a couple from Westchester. And all the other jurors were north of Westchester. So this is Trump country. Orange, Putnam counties.
Orange? Is she referring to, or is that a reference to Orange Man Bad? I'm not exactly sure. Or is orange mean it's like slightly like red leaning? Is that what that means?
That's who was on our jury. And when you get, the random draw comes in, there's not too much you can do about it. Those are the jurors you're stuck with.
You're stuck with.
And we had one guy on that jury who we found out late in the process and almost gave me a heart attack.
Timmy, by the way, I'll be trying to do some collabs with Tim. He'll be in town for the Republican National Convention. Make sure you let him know to holler at his boy when he's out here. I think we're staying in two areas that are kind of a half hour away from each other, but hopefully I can work on something with Tim to do maybe make my triumphant return to Timcast IRL. But so this point, we're now the prosecutor is saying that she almost had a heart attack.
And we had one guy on that jury who we found out late in the process and almost gave me a heart attack, who said he got his news. We thought he said from a temple. And I was like, I don't know, maybe he's an Orthodox Jew or something. I couldn't figure it out. It turns out he gets his news from a podcaster by the name of Tim Pool.
By the way, nothing wrong with that. If they had said that they got their news from international newsreader Don Lemon, who is also in the same way a podcaster, they wouldn't have had a problem with it.
Name of Tim Pool, who's an incredibly right-wing, conspiratorial, conservative incel guy.
Oh, he called him an incel? Oh, Tim, you should sue her. I think just for the lulz, Tim should file suit for her calling him an incel. I mean, I don't think you win that lawsuit, but I do think it would be funny to see that go to court. I think, why would you smear Timmy like that? As far as I know, Timmy enjoys the company of women, and he is not angry at women. So, what is going on?
Who's an incredibly right-wing, conspiratorial, conservative incel guy who had said really negative things about E. Jean Carroll.
I don't know if he had said really negative things about this individual. It was my opinion that lawsuit was a sham, a railroad job. That's just my opinion. I don't know. Obviously, I didn't cover it as closely as Tim did.
I tried to get the guy off the jury for that reason, and the judge rightly said to me, "Too late, Ms. Kaplan. He's staying on."
So they tried to get somebody removed from the jury simply because they listened to Tim Pool. Now, I will say he still lost that case. Who is this idiot that thinks Tim Pool is right-wing conservative? Must be a horrible lawyer if that's how her brain works. He was threatening my paycheck for this silly case, E. Jean Carroll's lawyer, original take. Yeah, I'd say that. Anyone to the right of Stalin is considered far right by these people. The same lady would be yelling at kids for skating anywhere at any time. So miserable. It's like, it has to be a fan of CNN, MSNBC, CBS, NBC, etc. That would be totally normal. I mean, the idea that little Tim Pool. Now, look, I'm just, I all credit to what Tim has built. I don't have any prosecutors or lawyers, worried about, what I'm saying. So, Tim obviously has a massive reach. I just saw Joe Rogan re-released his podcast with Tim Pool. I mean, you see juror listen to conservative podcaster Tim Pool join verdict against Donald Trump. I don't know. The whole thing was a complete sham, in my opinion. Arguing for the removal of the juror, Carroll's lawyer said that Pool had at least twice on his show spoken of the case, saying of a June 2019 episode, "This woman, should we take her seriously? In my opinion, no. I'm sorry, when you're accusing someone of a crime 30 years after the fact, I don't know what we can do for you. By the way, that is a very normal opinion. I think, you're talking about, I mean, just look what happens every time they try to do a Supreme Court. Now, how many of you remember that they trotted out that Blasé Ford lady and her vocal fry and like, oh, the Kavanaugh is the worst. He did this terrible thing to me 100 years ago that I never reported until today. By the way, check out my GoFundMe, which literally happened, by the way. Carol's lawyer said that they would have objected. They would have objected sooner, but the trial was already underway. But an initial court transcript of the jurors' comments misstated Poole's name. Journalists covering the trials, however, had noticed the jurors' mention of Poole and written about it. The lawyers said that they thought they sought jurors' removal the morning after the news report came out. I mean, if any one of these jurors had watched CNN, MSNBC, any of this kind of stuff, they would have been fine with it, right? They just don't want anyone who's been, has consumed any part of the terrible, terrible thing that they hate, which is called the truth. You see here, Judge Kaplan, who is unrelated to Roberta Kaplan, told jurors after they delivered their verdict that they have right to speak about the case. Poole, who has objected to being labeled an extreme person, tweeted about the dispute over the juror Wednesday, saying, "If you think the show is far right, you're in a cult." Well, they are in a cult, right? Like they gave E. Jean Carroll $90 million for her saying this thing happened 30 years ago, and it's all he said, she said. It was all, again, Trump has to live by a standard of justice that no one else does. It's made up along the way. It's not actually, nobody else on the planet has to live by the standard at which Donald Trump lives by. Even if you don't like Trump, I find it, I would love to hear anybody legitimately argue against that. The fact that this guy just listened to Tim Pool, that means he should be disqualified from the jury. But listening to, listening to CNN, MSNBC, this kind of stuff, that would all be fine. Well, why would they want him off? Media Matters is worried about how much money he makes. By the way, I wonder how that lawsuit's going. Is Elon suing Media Matters? Is it just the ADL? I can't remember. But shout out Tim for triggering the right people. Absolutely love to see it. Hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, make sure you leave a like on it. If you haven't yet, subscribe or follow down below, and we'll talk to you again real soon.